November 20th, 1943, 5:02 hours. BDO Island, Tarawa Atoll. The tide is wrong. Gray light bleeds across the Pacific, revealing a thin strip of sand no longer than 2 miles, wrapped in concrete and steel. Offshore, Higgins' boats grind forward, their flat bows slamming against a coral reef that should be underwater. Instead, jagged limestone teeth wait just beneath the surface. Inside one landing craft, a Marine grips his M1 Garand so tightly his knuckles blanch. Salt spray coats his helmet. The diesel engine rattles beneath his boots. Ahead, BDO is already alive. Japanese 8-inch coastal guns fire first. The concussion rolls across the lagoon, lifting plumes of water beside the transport ships. Machine gun nests stitched into coconut log bunkers begin to chatter. Tracer fire arcs red through morning haze. The island, barely 300 yards wide in places, erupts like a steel trap snapping shut. Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki's garrison has been waiting. Nearly 4,800 defenders, dug deep into reinforced concrete pillboxes, artillery revetments, and a spiderweb of trenches command every approach. Their fields of fire overlap with mathematical precision. From the air, BDO looks small enough to jog across. From the water, it feels like a continent of guns. The first wave stalls at the reef. The Higgins boat shudders, stuck fast on coral 500 yards from shore. The coxswain curses. The ramp cannot drop. The depth is wrong. Marines stare at one another. The order comes anyway. Over the side, they step into water chest deep. Mortar rounds begin walking across the lagoon, white geysers slamming down in rhythmic intervals. The reef becomes a killing field. Packs drag men under. Radios short out. Flamethrower canisters float loose and spin away. A Marine from the 2nd Division struggles upright, rifle above his head, boots scraping coral as machine gun fire tears the surface around him. You would not expect this from an island the size of Central Park. But BDO is the key to the Gilberts, and the Gilberts open the road toward the Marshalls and beyond. That is why the U.S. Navy has assembled battleships, carriers, cruisers, and destroyers in a ring of steel. That is why naval gunfire has pounded this strip of sand for days. And yet the bunkers remain. A Marine corporal reaches the beach. He throws himself against a seawall built from palm logs and sand. Bullets snap overhead. To his left, a Sherman tank designated for amphibious assault burns in shallow water. Turret skewed at an angle that suggests finality. The tide that was supposed to float armor ashore never came. Behind him, men are still in the lagoon. The noise is continuous. 75mm field guns bark from hidden embrasures. Type 92 heavy machine guns hammer methodically, their crews invisible inside reinforced casemates. The island is only 2.5 miles long, yet it feels endless because every yard costs blood. A Navy destroyer edges closer than doctrine allows. Its 5-inch guns fire point-blank into visible bunkers, shock waves flattening palms. But the defenders do not break. A Marine lieutenant tries to organize a push over the seawall. His voice vanishes in the roar. He climbs anyway. 2 steps. Then he disappears in a burst of sand and smoke. There is no maneuver here. No sweeping flank. Only forward. By 6:30, the lagoon is a graveyard of stalled craft. Radios crackle with fragmented calls for naval gunfire adjustments. Corpsmen crawl through open sand, dragging wounded back to the thin strip of cover. The sun climbs higher. Heat thickens. The smell of cordite and ruptured fuel drifts over BDO. Rear Admiral Shibasaki had once boasted that 1 million Americans could not take Tarawa in 100 years. Watching the reef turn red in the early light, it does not sound like bravado. It sounds like arithmetic. And the first day has only just begun. By 8:10 hours, the reef is no longer the worst place to be. The beach is. Marines of the 2nd Division lie pressed against a crude seawall of coconut logs and packed sand, a barrier barely 3 feet high. It is the only thing between them and interlocking Japanese fields of fire sweeping the open stretch of red beach. Behind them, the lagoon churns with wrecked LCVPs and drifting bodies. Ahead, the island narrows into a killing corridor of bunkers, trenches, and artillery pits that have survived days of naval bombardment almost untouched. The pre-invasion shelling had looked devastating from offshore. Battleships like USS Maryland and USS Colorado hurled 16-inch armor-piercing rounds into Bedio. Carrier aircraft from USS Essex and USS Yorktown dropped bombs and strafed visible positions. Observers believed the island was finished. It wasn't. Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki's men had burrowed deep, reinforced concrete pillboxes, some with walls 8 feet thick, absorbed the blast. Artillery pieces were shielded in covered revetments. Firing ports were angled to rake the beaches from the flanks. From where you crouch against the seawall, it becomes clear the bombardment had shaken the surface, not the spine. A platoon sergeant shouts for Bangalore torpedoes. The tubes are dragged forward under fire, sections screwed together with shaking hands. A corporal rises, shoves the explosive charge beneath a strand of barbed wire, and scrambles back. The detonation is sharp, violent. Smoke lifts. Move! They vault the seawall. The first yards inland are chaos. Sand churned by artillery has turned into a furnace under the climbing sun. Japanese machine guns, Type 92s, hammer from low-slung bunkers masked with palm trunks and sand. A Marine flamethrower team crawls forward. The operator squeezes a trigger. A jet of ignited fuel arcs into a firing slit. For a moment, the bunker vanishes behind orange flame. Then the shooting stops. Not everywhere. A Sherman tank, one of the few that made it ashore, clanks forward, its tracks grinding over debris and bodies alike. Its 75mm gun fires point-blank into a concrete emplacement. The shell strikes, smoke belches outward, but the structure holds. The tank pivots, searching for another angle, while riflemen cluster around its steel bulk as moving cover. The island is so small you can see the ocean from nearly any rise. Yet every 50 yards feels like a separate battlefield. Trenches snake unpredictably, connecting strong points into a defensive grid. Japanese defenders emerge from concealed spider holes behind advancing Marines, grenades already in hand. Close combat becomes immediate and personal. Bayonets flash. Rifle stock swing. By mid-morning, unit cohesion fractures. Company commanders are down. Radio operators lie motionless beside smashed SCR, 300 sets. Small groups form around whoever can stand and shout. Leadership becomes situational, raw. Offshore, naval gunfire liaison officers adjust coordinates desperately. Destroyers edge closer, ignoring the risk of grounding on the reef. 5-inch shells scream overhead, slamming into suspected bunker lines only yards from Marine positions. Sand and coral rain down. The concussion punches the air from lungs. Still the defenders fire. You look at the map later and see Bedio's dimensions. Barely 291 acres. On paper, it seems absurd that so much steel and flesh could collide in so little space. But on the ground, scale dissolves. The island becomes a maze of death measured not in miles but in feet. At 11:30 hours, reports reach Major General Julian Smith aboard USS Maryland. Casualties are mounting far beyond projections. Entire waves have been pinned on the reef. Requests for reinforcements intensify. The landing timetable is shattered. Yet there is no withdrawal. By noon, fragments of 2nd Marines have pushed perhaps 100 yards inland on Red Beach. A sliver, a foothold carved in blood. Japanese artillery continues to fire from the western end of the island, untouched. And as the tide finally begins to creep inward, lifting stranded landing craft off the coral, a new wave prepares to cross the same lagoon that is now thick with smoke, debris, and the unmistakable stain of loss. The seawall is no longer the line. The airstrip lies ahead. November 20th, 1943, 13:40 hours. The sun is merciless now. Heat shimmers above the shattered palms of Bedio, turning the island's central airstrip into a flat, blinding plain of coral dust and compacted sand. It runs east to west like a scar through the island's spine. To cross it means exposure. To stay short of it means stalemate. Marines of the 2nd Division gather in fragmented lines at its edge, crouched behind splintered debris and the hulks of burned-out tractors. The airstrip is only a few hundred yards wide. From a distance, it looks like nothing. From here, it feels like a desert without cover. Beyond it, more bunkers wait. Japanese gunners have pre-registered every inch of this open ground. Mortars drop with methodical precision. Machine gun fire sweeps low and flat, chewing into the coral surface, kicking up white bursts that sting like shrapnel. The defenders do not need to see clearly. They know the geometry of this field. A Marine captain signals forward. There is no elaborate maneuver left to attempt. Naval gunfire has shifted to deeper targets. Air support from carrier-based Dauntless dive bomber screams overhead, releasing bombs into the western end of the island, but the strip itself remains under enfilading fire. The order comes down the line. They run. Boots pound across coral. Packs bounce against spines. Rifles are held tight to chests. The first men make it 20 yards before a burst from a concealed Type 92 cuts through them. Others drop flat, crawling, dragging wounded by web gear. Corpsmen move in short, frantic dashes. Red crosses stark against the white glare. A Sherman tank roars forward from the left flank, its engine straining. The crew has decided not to wait. The 75mm gun fires on the move, shells detonating against a low concrete blockhouse that had been raking the crossing. Smoke pours from its embrasure. The tank keeps advancing, becoming a magnet for anti-tank fire. A hidden 37mm gun answers. The impact slams into the Sherman side armor. The vehicle lurches but continues. Inside, the crew fights to keep the turret aligned. You begin to understand something brutal and simple. This battle is arithmetic in reverse. Each yard forward costs men the Americans cannot easily replace here. Each bunker silenced is a victory measured in lives. By 1,500 hours, small knots of Marines have reached the far side of the airstrip. They cling to shallow depressions, firing back into firing slits barely visible in the glare. Flamethrower teams move up again, escorted by riflemen who lay suppressive fire. One Marine crawls close enough to press the nozzle directly into a bunker opening before triggering the ignition. The explosion is concussive. A deep roar followed by silence and black smoke rolling skyward. But every bunker cleared reveals another behind it. Rear Admiral Shibasaki's defensive network is layered. Communication trenches allow Japanese infantry to shift laterally undercover, emerging unpredictably to counterattack. Snipers fire from palm stumps and collapsed roofs. Grenades arc subtly from unseen hands. Offshore, Major General Julian Smith receives grim updates. Casualties already exceed 1,000. Some landing waves have been virtually annihilated on the reef. Yet withdrawing now would mean abandoning the wounded still pinned along the beaches and lagoon. The island must be taken. As afternoon bleeds toward evening, the Marines hold two tenuous footholds inland. They are separated, isolated pockets surrounded by entrenched resistance. The airstrip, though partially crossed, remains under intermittent fire. And then, shortly before dusk, word filters through shattered platoons. Rear Admiral Shibasaki may be dead, killed by naval shelling near his command post. If true, it changes nothing immediately, because as the light fades, the Japanese defenders prepare for something they have drilled for relentlessly. Night, November 20th, 1943, 1812 hours. BDO Island sinks into darkness without relief. The firing does not stop. It changes tone. Daylight had exposed everything in brutal clarity. Now shadows swallow the shattered palms and broken seawalls. Smoke hangs low over the island, mixing with humidity until the air itself feels heavy enough to grip. The Marines who have clawed their way across the airstrip dig shallow foxholes with entrenching tools and bare hands. Coral is unforgiving. Every scrape sounds too loud. Out beyond the thin perimeter, the Japanese defenders regroup. The doctrine of the Imperial Japanese Navy Special Naval Landing Forces does not allow surrender. Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki may be dead, but his orders remain intact. Hold BDO at any cost. The defenders move through communication trenches and spider holes invisible in the dark. Ammunition is redistributed. Bayonets are fixed. You hear them before you see them. Whistles. A sudden shrill note cuts through the night, followed by shouted commands in Japanese. Then the first wave surges forward. Silhouettes burst from palm shadows and trench mouths, charging straight at the Marine lines. Machine guns open up instantly. M1919 Brownings chatter in short. Control bursts. M1 rifles crack in disciplined rhythm. The darkness flashes white with muzzle fire. The assault is close. Too close. Grenades detonate inside half-dug foxholes. A Marine corporal swings his rifle like a club when his ammunition runs dry. A Japanese sailor lunges with bayonet. Both men fall locked together in the coral dust. The perimeter bends, then stiffens as officers and non-commissioned officers shout men back into position. The island is so small that the gunfire echoes, strangely, overlapping from every direction. It feels as though the entire Pacific has shrunk to a few hundred yards of chaos. Offshore, destroyers illuminate the shoreline with star shells. Harsh white light drifts downward on parachutes, casting grotesque moving shadows across the battlefield. Every palm trunk becomes a potential attacker. A Sherman tank that survived the afternoon pushes forward blindly, its engine growling. The turret reverses left and right, firing canister rounds at shred advancing figures at close range. The concussion rattles teeth. But the tank cannot be everywhere. Gaps open in the line. At 22:40 hours, another coordinated thrust slams into the Western Marine pocket near the airstrip. Japanese forces exploit shallow depressions and drainage ditches to close distance unseen. One machine gun nests overrun. The crew fights to the last man. Reinforcements countercharge with fixed bayonets, reclaiming the position in savage hand-to-hand combat measured in feet, not yards. You would think exhaustion would slow them. It does not. The Japanese defenders understand that time is their ally. The longer BDO holds, the more it costs. Every casualty amplifies the island's importance. And for the Marines, fatigue becomes a physical weight. Water is scarce. Wounded lie in shallow scrapes, morphine running low. Corpsmen move constantly, ignoring their own injuries. Shortly after midnight, a final major counterattack surges from the eastern end of the island. It is less organized, more desperate. Individual groups break through thin sectors of the line before being cut down. Flares burst overhead again, bathing the battlefield in stark white. The coral glows like bone. By 2 o'clock hours, the assaults diminish. Sporadic rifle shots replace coordinated charges. Moans carry across the airstrip. The smell of burned powder and blood lingers heavy in the humid air. Marine officers conduct whispered roll calls. Entire squads answer with silence. Yet the line has held. As the first hint of dawn creeps along the eastern horizon, revealing the wreckage of night in brutal detail, the scale of loss becomes visible. Bodies lie tangled across the coral plain, American and Japanese alike. The island has not grown larger overnight, but its cost has multiplied, and in the growing light, fresh Japanese positions are already opening fire again. Section 5. No room to retreat. November 21st, 1943. 6:25 hours. The second sunrise over BDO reveals a battlefield compressed into something almost unreal. Smoke drifts low across the airstrip. The coral is no longer white. Marines of the 2nd Division rise stiffly from foxholes carved into ground that feels more like concrete than sand. Many have not slept. Some have not eaten. Canteens are nearly dry. Ammunition is redistributed from the fallen. There is no rear area on an island this small. Every position is front line. Ahead, Japanese strong points still dominate the western half of BDO. Concrete pillboxes squat low behind sand berms. Anti-boat guns have been reoriented inland, now serving as direct fire artillery against the Marine footholds. The defenders remain disciplined, firing in short, deliberate bursts. Major General Julian Smith orders renewed pressure. The beachhead must expand before another night falls. Reinforcements are finally reaching shore in greater numbers as the tide improves. LVD amphibian tractors grind over the reef, delivering fresh rifle companies and much-needed supplies directly onto the sand. Their arrival changes the geometry of the fight. Sherman tanks that survived the first day regroup near the airstrip's edge. Their steel hulls are scarred by shell fragments and small arms fire, but they still move. Infantry cluster around them again, using the tanks as mobile shields. The plan is simple. Advance in coordinated thrust, bunker by bunker, yard by yard. Naval gunfire resumes with terrifying proximity. Destroyers close within 1,000 yards. firing 5-inch shells almost flat trajectory into visible targets. The concussion rolls across Marine lines, rattling helmets and loosening coral dust from shallow trenches. Spotters call corrections over scratchy radios. Every adjustment must be exact. Friendly lines are sometimes less than 100 yards away. A flamethrower team approaches a reinforced blockhouse that had survived the previous day. Riflemen lay suppressive fire into firing slits. The operator crawls forward under covering smoke. When he triggers the igniter, a sustained torrent of flame pours into the bunker. The sound is distinct, a deep rushing roar followed by silence. The Marines wait a full minute before advancing past it. There is no cheering now, only movement. By mid-morning, sections of the eastern perimeter begin to collapse under sustained pressure. Japanese defenders withdraw through trench networks, conducting short counterattacks before falling back again. Snipers continue to inflict casualties from concealed positions, forcing Marines to clear every crater and depression as though it hides an enemy. The island's dimensions become deceptive again. On a map, BDO remains a sliver in the Pacific. On the ground, every 50 yards contains multiple hardened positions. Clearing one reveals overlapping fire from another. Engineers use demolition charges against concrete walls that refuse to crack under small arms. At 1300 hours, reports confirm that much of the central airstrip is under Marine control. The cost is staggering. Casualty clearing stations near the beach are overwhelmed. Navy corpsmen work without pause, tagging the wounded, administering plasma, loading the most critical onto LVTs for transfer to hospital ships offshore. Yet the western tip of the island still resists. Japanese artillery continues firing sporadically from positions that were believed destroyed. Ammunition bunkers, buried deep beneath layers of coral and timber, supply the last defenders. They know reinforcements will not come. Their objective is no longer victory. It is attrition. As afternoon light shifts westward, Marine units tighten their lines for another coordinated push. Tanks roll forward again, crushing barricades of palm trunks. Rifle squads fan out behind them, scanning every shadow. The island is shrinking under pressure, but it refuses to yield quickly. And with night approaching once more, commanders understand a brutal truth. If BDO is not broken today, the third night may cost even more than the first. November 22nd, 1943, 7:10 hours. The third morning rises over an island that no longer resembles a palm-fringed outpost. BDO is stripped raw. Tree stumps stand like broken teeth. Concrete bunkers are cracked open, some still smoldering. The air smells of salt, smoke, and something metallic that clings to the throat. Only the western tip remains in organized Japanese hands. It is a narrow triangle of ground, hemmed in by the lagoon on one side and the open Pacific on the other. On a map, it measures a few hundred yards. On the ground, it is layered with trenches, firing pits, and final defensive positions prepared for exactly this moment. Marine battalion commanders gather near the captured airstrip. The plan is direct and uncompromising. Compress the pocket from east to west in coordinated lines, using tanks, demolitions, and flamethrowers to eliminate resistance systematically. There will be no bypassing strong points. Every position must be destroyed. Naval gunfire begins again, walking methodically across the western end. 5-inch shells from destroyers burst in tight intervals. Carrier aircraft circle overhead, dropping fragmentation bombs on visible trench lines. The bombardment is shorter than previous days. There is little left to flatten. At 8:30 hours, the advance begins. Sherman tanks move first, engines growling low. Infantry follows at measured intervals, rifles raised, bayonets fixed. The distance to the Japanese lines is less than 400 yards. It feels closer. Resistance erupts almost immediately. A concealed 13mm machine gun opens fire from a camouflage position dug into the lagoon side. The first tank pivots and fires point blank. The blast collapses a position in a spray of sand and timber. Marines surge forward behind the tank's hull, firing into adjacent trenches. The fighting is intimate and relentless. Japanese defenders emerge from dugouts only to be met by rifle fire at 10 yards. Grenades are exchanged over trench lips. Engineers crawl forward with satchel charges. placing explosives against reinforced entrances before scrambling back. Each detonation shakes the coral ground. There are no large maneuvers now, only compression. By late morning, the pocket has shrunk to less than 2 football fields. Japanese resistance intensifies rather than weakens. Small groups launch sudden, localized counterattacks, attempting to break through thin Marine sectors. Each is repelled with concentrated fire. The Marines have learned the rhythm of these assaults. Shortly after noon, a final coordinated charge surges from the remaining trench network. It is not the disciplined night assault of the first day. It is a desperate rush. Dozens of defenders run forward, shouting, rifles and bayonets raised. Marine machine guns cut them down in converging arcs. The charge collapses before reaching the lines. Silence follows, broken only by sporadic rifle shots from isolated holdouts. At 13:30 hours, organized resistance effectively ends. Small pockets continue to fire from concealed holes and debris piles, but the western tip is under Marine control. Officers move cautiously through the wreckage, verifying clear bunkers. Engineers mark position safe. BDO, 2.5 miles long and barely half a mile wide, has taken 3 days. The cost is staggering. Over 1,000 Marines killed, thousands more wounded. Of the nearly 4,800 Japanese defenders and laborers on the island, only a few dozen remain alive. You stand on the western edge and look east across the entire island. It fits in a single glance. The lagoon glints under the afternoon sun. Offshore, the fleet waits in disciplined formation. Such a small place. And yet its capture will open the Central Pacific. Airfields will rise where bunkers once stood. Supply lines will stretch forward toward the Marshalls, then the Marianas, then closer still to Japan itself. But in this moment, strategy feels distant. All that remains is the quiet after overwhelming violence. November 23rd, 1943. 9 o'clock hours. The guns have fallen silent, but BDO does not feel quiet. The island measures roughly 291 acres. You can walk from lagoon to ocean in minutes. Now, every yard holds evidence of what it demanded. Marines move slowly across the coral, not in assault formation anymore, but in search teams. Rifles are still carried at the ready. Isolated Japanese holdouts remain hidden in collapsed bunkers and buried chambers, emerging without warning. Even in victory, there is caution. Navy corpsmen continue their grim work. Casualty collection points near the beach overflow with stretchers. Amphibian tractors shuttle the wounded to transports offshore, their steel hulls now stained and dented. On hospital ships anchored beyond the reef, surgeons operate in shifts without pause. Plasma bottles hang from improvised hooks as scalpels work under harsh white light. The numbers begin to solidify. More than 1,000 Marines killed in 3 days. Over 2,000 wounded. Entire companies reduced to fractions of their strength. Of the Japanese garrison, only a handful survive, most of them Korean laborers or severely wounded sailors unable to continue fighting. Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki's earlier boast echoes differently now. 1 million Americans might not have been required, but the island extracted a toll far beyond what planners expected. Pre-invasion estimates had predicted perhaps a few hundred casualties. The reef, the tide miscalculation, the resilience of reinforced bunkers, all combined into a brutal lesson. War correspondents step ashore carefully. Photographers from publications like Life capture images that will soon reach American households. Photographs of Marines wading through chest-deep water under fire. Bodies along the seawall. The raw truth of amphibious assault against fortified positions. These images will shock the public. Until now. The Pacific Wars often seemed distant, measured in naval communiques and arrow lines on maps. BDO makes it personal. Engineers begin clearing debris from the central airstrip almost immediately. Bulldozers grind forward over scarred ground. The same strip that had been a corridor of fire will soon host American aircraft. Seabees mark out runway repairs with precise efficiency. Strategy resumes even while burial details move quietly across the sand. And there are many to bury. Temporary graves are dug where coral allows. Identification tags are checked and recorded. Chaplains speak brief words over rows that stretch farther than anyone expected for a place this small. The ocean breeze carries their voices thinly across the lagoon. You can see the entire battlefield from the western tip now. The lagoon where Marines waited under machine gun fire. The seawall where the first foothold formed. The airstrip that became a crucible. The final trench network crushed on the third day. It all fits inside a single frame. That is the most unsettling part. The island size mocks the scale of the sacrifice. It forces a question that commanders in Washington and Pearl Harbor cannot ignore. If every tiny atoll in the Central Pacific demands this price, what will the cost be when the fight reaches the larger islands? Tarawa becomes more than a victory. It becomes a warning. Amphibious doctrine is rewritten. Greater emphasis on accurate tidal intelligence. Longer, more focused naval bombardment. Improved coordination between armor and infantry. The lessons learned here will shape operations at Kwajalein, Saipan, Peleliu, and eventually Iwo Jima. But on this morning, those future battles are abstractions. The reality is immediate and human. Marines sit in small groups, helmets off, staring across ground they crossed at terrible cost. Some write letters home, struggling to describe something that does not translate easily into words. Others say nothing at all. The Pacific remains vast and indifferent beyond the reef. And somewhere beyond the horizon, more islands wait. November 24th, 1943, 1640 hours. The first American aircraft lands on BDO's repaired strip under a sky scrubbed clean by wind. Its wheels touch down where men had fallen only days before. The engine winds down, and for a moment, the sound is almost peaceful. The transformation begins immediately. Seabees expand the runway with methodical precision. Fuel drums are stacked. Anti-aircraft guns are positioned along the perimeter. What had been a fortress of the Imperial Japanese Navy Special Naval Landing Forces is now an American forward base in the Gilbert Islands chain. From this narrow atoll, reconnaissance flights will push west. Bombers will stage toward the Marshalls. The Central Pacific Drive has found its foothold. On paper, the objective is clear. Tarawa secures a stepping stone. It shortens supply lines. It projects air power deeper into Japanese-held territory. It demonstrates that fortified atolls can be taken, but the paper does not show the reef. It does not show the Higgins boats grinding to a halt on coral teeth. It does not show Marines wading through chest-deep water under convergent machine gun fire. It does not capture the night counterattacks, the shrill whistles in the dark, the flash of bayonets at arm's length. Strategy compresses brutality into arrows and dates. BDO resists that compression. Major General Julian Smith files his reports. Casualty figures are transmitted. Lessons are cataloged. Washington studies the numbers closely. The cost shocks even hardened planners. Yet there is no retreat from the island-hopping strategy now unfolding across the Pacific. If anything, Tarawa clarifies the stakes. Every future landing will carry its shadow. When Marines storm the beaches of Kwajalein, commanders will remember the tide tables. When they hit the black sands of Iwo Jima, they will remember reinforced bunkers that survived bombardment. When they fight to the ridges of Okinawa, they will recall how small ground can demand enormous sacrifice. Tarawa becomes a proving ground where theory met resistance and paid in blood. You can stand at the eastern end of BDO and look west across its entire length, 2.5 miles, a few hundred yards wide. The lagoon calm again, the Pacific stretching indifferent and endless beyond the reef. It is difficult to reconcile the scale of violence with the modesty of the terrain. That disparity is the story. A tiny island held strategic weight far beyond its size. Nearly 4,800 defenders turned it into a fortress. In 76 hours, more than 1,000 American Marines were killed securing ground small enough to fit inside a city park. The numbers are stark, but they are not abstract. Each represents a face, a voice, a family that would soon receive a telegram. War in the Pacific would continue for nearly 2 more years. It would grow larger, bloodier, more complex. Fleets would clash across vast distances. Bombers would darken skies over cities. Yet the lessons of BDO would remain embedded in every operational plan. Underestimate the enemy at your peril. Respect the terrain, no matter how small. Assume nothing about tide, defenses, or resolve. As the sun lowers toward the horizon, on November 24th. Marines gather near the lagoon's edge. Some watch aircraft take off from the newly secured strip. Others stare out at the reef where so many had fallen. The ocean gives no sign of what it witnessed. Waves break gently against coral. The island is quiet now, but its silence carries weight. Tarawa proved that the path across the Pacific would not be swift or cheap. It revealed the true cost of prying open Japan's defensive perimeter, and it marked the beginning of a campaign where tiny specks of land would decide the fate of nations. A small island, a massive price,